All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. And it's an honor and a privilege to be here as a part of PancakesCon. Just fantastic. This is my first time getting to be a presenter here, and what an amazing set of talks it's been so far. So just really a pleasure to get to be here and share with you all. So my topics for today are launching your cybersecurity career from non-traditional backgrounds, and we'll take a break at the halfway point and completely change gears into talking about getting started writing young adult fantasy novels, and kind of a little story of my my writing history, how I got to where I am now, which is not all the way there, but it's quite some difference from where I started, and we'll talk about that and have a lot of fun with it as well. But first, we will start with getting going in cybersecurity, which really will apply to other technical arenas as well from non-traditional backgrounds, which I think is an excellent topic, especially given sort of the focus here at PancakesCon on being able to talk to those who may be newer in their career. I know there's folks who are going to be watching this who may themselves come from non-traditional backgrounds and may be considering advancing in or breaking into cybersecurity from those sorts of backgrounds. And that is a passion of mine. It's something that we strongly believe in here at Level 6. So let's jump right in. Okay, so the part one agenda, we're going to start off by introducing Level 6 because this is one of those talks where we're talking very much from experience. We're talking from lived experience as an organization that hires and includes and has thrived with significant numbers of folks from non-traditional backgrounds. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our startup and about how it looks in our organization and how we got there. And then we're going to look, of course, at the staffing gap, which is what this is really all about. It comes down to how it's really past time for our industry to make a change in how we look at staffing. Because, of course, the staffing gap is in the news on a weekly, monthly basis. How many open positions there are left unfilled in the cybersecurity industry, nationally and worldwide. Then we're going to talk about how you make it work. We're going to talk about tips, recommendations, and realities, both for cybersecurity leaders and for career seekers, because I think there's some of each that are listening to these talks and that could gain from what we've seen here at Level 6. And then a summary. And then our second agenda for part two will be introducing the tome writer. You'll understand that later. Talking about the storytelling compulsion, back to non-traditional backgrounds again, but from a whole different direction. And then the beginning, middle, and no end as a writer. All of that will make sense later, I promise. Okay, so let's start with introducing Level 6 cybersecurity. We are an AI cybersecurity startup. We're based right here in the outskirts of Cincinnati. I'm speaking to you now from a illustrious basement in front of a very fake background, but it's not digital. Here in the basement of my home, just in Mason, Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati. We are exactly 2 years old. We had our second birthday 11 days ago, I believe. And we are precisely 2 years old as of this month. We were founded in March of 2022, which I've been told, and I believe it from the experience, is pretty awesome for a startup to survive that long. It's pretty exciting to be where we are. And it's worth noting that we have survived our 2 years with a strong and very appropriate for this talk focus on changing the rules and changing the status quo about how you staff and who you bring into your organization as a literally cutting edge technology organization that fully embraces non-traditional backgrounds as much as we do traditional backgrounds as we've built our small team. So to give a little context, what we do here at Level 6, we've created a platform, a flagship product. It's called Listen. It's the Level 6 InfoSec Strategy Network. It is a machine learning based tool that involves gathering lots and lots of open source intelligence, OSINT, on cybersecurity, basically strategies and their outcomes, meaning breaches and failures, but also success stories. We're an OSINT-based tool that basically absorbs from all over the internet and including social media and looks into academic resources, academic journals that are peer-reviewed, articles, analytics, even as far afield as legal settlements and legal documentation, publicly published information on policies and procedures and approaches. We gather OSINT from all these types of information sources and align them within our own proprietary data model. And then we run analytics on all of these, both strategies and approaches to cybersecurity and their outcomes, correlating when different approaches, different high-level strategy decisions in cybersecurity, when they correlate with success or not. The whole point of our tool is to be an AI cybersecurity advisor tool. It's software that is to be an AI cybersecurity advisor for decision makers. The output of our tool, of all of our analytics, of our correlation analysis, uses all that data I just mentioned, all this OSINT that we gather on what's really working and not in cybersecurity from the strategy layer, and the prices, the cost profile of defensive strategies that people are actually using. We included just basically a very hardy cost model in our tool that looks at strategies, looks at their costs, and then looks at the outcomes that I mentioned before, which are either success stories or failures of various types, and compares all of the above. What that gives us is a tool that is a machine learning model that is continually calculating the bang for the buck of specific decisions in cybersecurity strategy. Something for a CISO or a cybersecurity manager, whatever your title might be. The person who is making the critical decisions about cybersecurity could leverage a tool like ours to see exactly what decisions have high value and which ones don't. And what collections of decisions then put together have high value in terms of actually delivering on the promise of less losses, less breaches, less problems, less negative events, and which ones don't deliver for their cost. So you can think of it as a bang for your buck calculator for decision makers to use. Now, why is that important? Because again, the key to what we do, of course, it's a machine learning engine, a lot of data management, a lot of data analytics, and a lot of OSINT engineering, gathering external data, gathering inputs. And that is where in all those areas, as well as in some of our business-focused areas like business development, we have strongly leaned into the fact that there are more sources of incredible expertise and high-performing individuals out there from non-traditional backgrounds than I think anyone would have thought when looking at a startup like ours. You know, the traditional story is you're going to, if you're a startup, you're getting a bunch of engineers, right? And you've all been in the industry, you've all been doing the thing, and you get together and you're in a garage, you're in a basement, and you've built this high-tech tool because you're all, ex-Google and you're all ex-whatever, you're all ex-Microsoft, and all these engineers come together and they build the thing. Now, needless to say, we do have engineers, right? We have great data developers and data scientists and, really proficient cloud engineers, cloud security engineers, developers in all these different areas. But guess what? We also have a significant number of people who don't have degrees, who did not go to college at all, or who have college degrees from completely unrelated liberal arts or general studies areas that are key contributors to technical aspects of our tool, of our software. Non-traditional backgrounds that we have not only embraced, but just excelled at because we have changed the status quo. We just decided from the very start to drop that kind of a, set in stone view of the world that you have to have a degree and you have to do this and you have to do that. And it works. And that's what we want to talk about today. It's really a change of view that's worth looking into. We have 18 employees right now, some full-time, some part-time, but approximately 8 of those, so a significant percentage, come from non-traditional backgrounds. And again, it's the types that I just mentioned. Not having prior technology experience at all, or just not having a degree, or not having cybersecurity experience, even though you're working in a cybersecurity field. Well, how do we make that work? Well, we'll get into that. And there are various roles. I mentioned OSINT and what we call data harvesting being a key part of that. And several of these folks from, again, non-traditional backgrounds are in our lead team, our senior managers in our organization. Okay, real quick, just a little bit about that cybersecurity staffing gap. It's always in the news, so I'll only spend a few moments on this slide. How big is the gap? Right now, I think the latest article I saw, which was from earlier this year from Cybersecurity, said about 500,000 unfilled positions in the USA. I've seen that number as high as 1 million unfilled positions in the USA, but worldwide, the number is now predicted to be 3.5 million by 2025, which is greater than what I last saw as a $2.5 million deficit in the 2024-2025 timeframe. That number is growing among many reasons because of the dramatic increases in technology evolution we're all watching right now, particularly in automation, in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, and advancements in cloud dynamics and cloud usage for all these types of tools. and integrations between legacy, which is now something that's a year old or more, and all of these new types of technologies. Integrations of multi-types, multi-age, whenever you're putting dissimilar things together, you have the opportunity for cybersecurity risk. So the need is going to grow as these technologies grow. Are we providing ourselves in this industry enough people, enough, our colleges basically, are they putting out enough people to fill this gap? Well, absolutely not. The gap has not been shrinking. It's been staying stagnant or it's been growing. So there's a lot of opportunities out there that appear out of reach to many, and that is a problem. Now, another negative, that last comment there, that last bullet, for those of us that are in the field, this high demand does create high salaries, which should be attractive to people who want to get into a career that's got high salaries and that can generate great income for you. But wow, the terrible burnout rates, the lack of endurance that you see, the short stays, the quick turnover for cybersecurity managers and for cybersecurity staff members who would get burned out. This is a huge thing, and this is directly related to the shortfall in people in these positions. If there's never enough people, I don't think I've ever met a cybersecurity leader who's really fully satisfied with their staffing. Now, you need more. There's so much to do. There's only so many hours to go around. As a side note, that's part of what we're building our tool for, to help with data to show those decision makers where to focus their people's time. Because it's not just money that you're working on, it's also time that you're working with that needs to be budgeted and managed. Having tools to do that helps. Developing organizations that can do all this and support all these things, the key idea here is lowering the bar of entry. Lowering the bar of entry for more and more people so that we can move faster at shrinking this wage gap or this unfilled positions gap, the overall shortfall in positions. That is the goal. It takes intentionality, and it takes a lot of other key aspects on the part of the executives, the hiring managers, people like me who start a company and do staffing. If we're not intentional about this kind of change and approach, it's never going to happen. I'm going to say that probably 5 more times in the next 10 minutes. But also there's some key things we can share that I'm going to share with you all from our members of Level 6 who come from non-traditional backgrounds, who gave me some feedback, basically in a short questionnaire that I'm going to share with you all and kind of summarize what they thought about what it was like getting going in a high-tech company from non-technical fields. So again, it's a question of will and it's of intentionality. This eye chart of a circle here, this is a gorgeous graphic of the different cybersecurity domains that you usually will see modeled in any one cyber domain chart. This happens to be the breakdown that we use. It's based off of the NIST CSF in this middle circle, at least up until 2.0. I didn't add the governance in here yet, but boy, do we love that because that's really important. We're as a tool that focuses on decision makers, we love talking about governance, and we model governance, in our machine learning tool. But all these different cyber domains all around the rim, everything from data governance to endpoint to email to network security to third-party security, application development security, all of these incredibly growing scope areas within cybersecurity, and no people, lacking of people. It's not there. And what's that give us? Sure, it's great that you will find that when you're looking for another position in cyber, the salaries may be going up and up, but oh my gosh, the workload and the gaps, and having gaps in productivity in these areas are a risk in and of themselves that's too often overlooked. Okay, so let's jump into how we make this work. How do we actually make this work from 2 perspectives? For executives, for hiring managers, for people who are startup founders like myself. Here's the key 6 points I want to circle in on. Restructure roles. This lines up with the intentionality that I mentioned. Be intentional about how you look at what you need to hire for, what kind of roles and responsibilities your positions have, and how they can be filled. Consider realigning traditional roles, traditional titles, so that you can meet potential new teammates, new hires from non-traditional backgrounds where they are. Restructure how you think about it. This is a key first place to start with. If your definition for your roles all have engineer in the title, and by that you mean it's an engineering degree, you may have just locked out a ton of people who are incredibly high performers who could have done this job incredibly well just based on the title alone. Now, we embrace giving titles that have nothing to do with your background here at Level 6, and that's something we think should become more prominent. And I know other organizations that are a little more, more that are just modern, that are more cutting edge, are doing this as well. But if you have your roles locked in such that the very nature of what you're looking for requires a certain degree and a certain traditional approach, you're going to find yourself kind of out of the running for these kinds of openings, for these kinds of filling your positions in these ways right out of the gate. Similarly, redesign your requirements. Reimagine the prerequisites that you have for your different positions of need. Focus more on the people, the types of people, their personality, their interest, their energy, and culture fit. I'm going to say culture about 10 more times too. Really important. Broaden our minds, I would say, to all of the other hiring managers, executives out there, other founders, startups, people who are hiring managers of big companies. Work to change the culture in the organization to redesign the requirements for these positions. Be intentional as hiring managers, as me, as a CEO of a small, tiny little startup. Be intentional about this approach. Look for ways to bring people in and bring them along, train them and integrate them, regardless of what their background is, if they are simply sharp people, if they have the ability to be performers. Learn how to identify people who are performers, even if they don't have a traditional background. Investing in training is, of course, huge. And that's why it says there in the green box, and training, and training, and training. Design types of training, cadence of training events that fit the type of person and or the individual, depending on the situation. We invest very heavily in training in our organization here at Level 6. We always want there to be the opportunity for the folks who come in, no matter who they are and where they come from background-wise, to get more and more steeped in not only what we're doing, but in the cybersecurity industry in general as it evolves. And this takes a lot of re-engagement, retraining, resharing, a lot of collaboration, and we do not have an office. We're not a centrally located organization. We're virtual only. All of our team members work from home offices virtually. We launched right after and kind of in the tail end of COVID. So like so many small organizations now, we work virtually, and yet we are close collaborating, and we use all the tools to make that happen, like I'm sure many of you do. That actually allows even more of this kind of a training and education-centric environment to form. Internal mentoring. This is crucial as well. All the training can't come from just one or two people. In the organizations, in the groups, our development team, our OSINT engineering team, and our business management team and our lead team, we have to internally mentor as well. There should be always kind of a culture of learning that's all over, not just from the high level on down, not just whoever is the smartest cyber person being the one who delivers the training, but everyone mentoring, sharing, people who know something, sharing it. And then that person, when they've learned that, sharing it. And probably most importantly, culture comes first. All of the above must be integrated within the culture of your organization. You need to have, for this to really work, a culture of acceptance, of diversity, and of positivity. Now, diversity, isn't that an interesting word to find here? Diversity takes many forms. All we're really saying here is about diversity of thought and of background and of history. That diversity matters well. There are so many folks that I've worked with who come from a very different background, not from a tech background, and have come into our organization, embraced and learned, and their history outside of technology has brought things to bear, brought things to light for us that become important, critical aspects in how we grow and how we move forward. Diversity is extraordinarily powerful, and it goes well beyond racial and sexual diversity. It goes way beyond that, and it's powerful to see. That final statement at the bottom, culture eats policy for lunch. I've been hearing that all my life, but it's amazing to see it at play in this startup and even in my first company that I founded, which was a consulting company. Culture eats policy for lunch. You can write all the policy you want. If your culture doesn't actually reflect and support your goals, it's never going to work. The intentionality is never going to happen. Okay, jumping now to career seekers, the other side of the coin. Again, these are comments and feedback that come from some of our team members who come from non-traditional backgrounds. This includes that we have OSINT engineers and data harvesters that have no college, that have never been to college at all, that we hired not long after they graduated from high school and began training them. We have people on our team who have college degrees in the liberal arts or in multidisciplinary studies. And we have members on our team in technical areas that came to us with little to no technical background. But you know what they did have? They had humility, they had patience, they had the desire to learn, they were sharp, and they committed themselves to working, to learning, to engaging, to leaning in. And that's where a lot of these pieces of feedback come in here. On the far left there, finding the right fit. This is important. If I was one who was from a non-traditional background, I'm hunting for a way to break into cyber, I'm going to work long and hard to find the right fit, to find the organization where the culture embraces me, as opposed to trying to, shoehorn my way in an organization that may be extremely traditional, locked in its ways, and that doesn't hire from non-traditional backgrounds. I'd be, beating my head against a brick wall. Find the right fit, incredibly important. I mentioned humility and patience. This came up in several comments that we received back. Embrace needing to learn. Embrace asking questions. Admit when you're wrong or don't know something. This is not always easy. So this comes back, really as a career seeker to core personality, core approach, being humble, being not afraid to say, oh my gosh, I think this might be wrong. I need help. Asking for more training, leaning in, which comes in over in the green box. These are all really important, and they align well if you find an organization with a culture that embraces these things. Language and literacy is key, and a lot of this is really what the training aspect is all about. Learning the language of cybersecurity and related tech, that's important. Chase certifications and classes if needed, if they're provided, and they should be. But not everything has to be a formal certification. Some of the certs are great, and some organizations, they're pushed and they can be really beneficial. But internal training is also very powerful and doesn't require any additional cost or certifications. It depends. You can be very flexible there. But learning the language, the terminology, that's the way to really get in the door. That's what opens and really lowers the bar of entry and allows an integration to become, allows one to lean in. When you start to know the terms, and that takes time. So that patience we mentioned earlier, this is also really important for the executives, the managers, the rest of the team. Embracing this, that it might take time, but it's worth it. Ask for and help make a plan, meaning a training plan, an advancement plan, having the opportunity to help figure out how we're going to get from day 1 to day 90 to day 365. And embrace being multidisciplinary. I love this comment. And if tech and cyber, if these are not your passions, if you want to work in these fields because you like it, but they're not really your passion may be in cooking or in writing or in music, but you also want to have a strong career and you like these things, be multidisciplinary. You can still pursue related careers and chase your passions. Because this is what I really love about PancakesCon, because we're talking about our passions as well as talking about cybersecurity. They're not always one and the same. I'm passionate about cybersecurity, but I'm even more passionate about writing, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And you can do both. You can have both. Embrace that and run with that. A summary for career seekers. The vast number of positions that are open out there equal an opportunity. I saw a fantastic tweet the other day from a famous cybersecurity person who I don't know personally, but I wish I knew better. And that tweet was a retweet of someone saying, if an amazing opportunity drops in your lap, take it and then learn how to make it work afterwards. Now, and I'm not saying fake it till you make it, though it might sound like that. What I'm really saying is, this is a true statement. If you have a chance to do something and you believe you can make an impact or it might change your life, go for it. Go for it. If you have that opportunity, go for it. And then learn and grow into the position as you go. It's a key thing, and it involves confidence, which is that second bullet. Confidence matters. Confidence can be learned. Use your network. If you don't have a network in cyber or in tech, create one. Several times, I would say a month, someone will reach out to me in LinkedIn, and I'll check out and see if they're a real person. But they'll reach out to me just kind of cold and say, hey, are you looking for interns? Or I might be looking for a position. And if they're related indirectly to someone I know, I'll respond and we'll chat. And if I'm looking for someone in the future that aligns to what they have, their background, well, that's a possibility right there. Creating networks, leveraging your network, getting into the community, always a great place to start. Focus on the language of cybersecurity and focus on cyber literacy. Find the right fit. Take the time to find the right fit instead of forcing others to change, which never works out. Be flexible, be patient, and be humble. Okay, that's the end of part one. That took a long time. So I'm going to jump right into part two instead of pausing for any questions if there are any. Because now we're going to spend the last few minutes until we get up to almost 7 talking about getting started writing young adult fantasy novels. I should have expanded that and saying young adult and middle grade and new adult, but that'll be too long of a title. This is the other side of my passions outside of cybersecurity. I've been writing for quite a while. I'm going to tell my story and talk about it a little bit. So I go by on Twitter, the Tome Writer. If you want to look me up, just look up at the Tome Writer. That's me. That's my other Twitter X persona. And I have to start with a big caveat. At least I consider it a big caveat. Some people don't care as much. This talk is about getting started as a writer in fantasy, and it may apply to other genres as well. But it's only about getting started because I have not yet reached my goals. My goal is to become a broadly published author of young adult, middle grade, maybe even new adult and adult fantasy novels. I love it. I want to get there. I've not been published yet. So if I had been published, the topic would be how to get published in these areas. Well, no, I haven't been there, but I've made enough progress that I have things to share. So here real quick is my writer's story. Story idea since 1976. That would be when I was 5 years old. That's probably not being generous enough. I probably should have said 1972 when I was 1 year old. But yeah, story ideas forever. And I've always loved fantasy in movies, in books, in music. Any place I can find fantasy, I've always naturally loved it. I know there's others here who are similarly bent. There was a great talk earlier from a guy talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I grew up as a D&D guy in the late 70s and all through the 80s. You know, true Stranger Things. Yep, that was me. So, you know, that's just my area. It's my passion. I love it. I began seriously writing in 2008. That's a long stretch. Now, before then, I had a ton of ideas in my head about stories. Most of it came from different D&D campaigns that me and my friends experienced and lived through when I was in junior high, middle school, junior high, and high school. Loved it. And I wanted to write these stories. I came up with all these stories. I never tried to write them. For decades, 2008, I decided, I think I've got it. I think I've got a unique enough idea. I'm going to write it down. I started writing. I went through lots of learning and improving. A little more about that coming up over the intervening years. And I had a lot to improve. I mean, a lot to improve. Then I decided I want to be traditionally published. So I decided to get a literary agent. I got my first literary agent in 2016. Didn't work out. 2 years later, I got my second literary agent in 2018. That worked out, but I still never got published. And now, years later, I'm back in the hunt for a new agent in 2024, literally as we speak. Within the last 8 weeks, I've actually reached out to a few potential new agent representatives about my work. Pretty exciting. I started writing young adult, which generally speaking is the high school to early college ages, maybe even late junior high through high school ages. Usually the main characters are teens, later teens to college age maybe, but then you get to new adult when you get to truly becoming an adult, a little older than that. So young adult falls right in that middle genre. All of you probably know what I mean by that. Middle grade, I started writing with my first agent around 2017. It was just a challenge for my first agent. I said, have you ever thought about writing middle grade? Meaning younger than young adult. These are where your main character is probably 11, 12, 13 years old, maybe 14 years old. And it's written for that audience, for younger kids who could see themselves, or maybe a few years older, see themselves as the main character, as the adventurer. And more recently, just in the last year, I've started working on ideas for new adult or adult fantasy as well. So quick background there. The screenshot is from my website. It's kevinejackson.com, and it's still up there, even though I haven't updated it in years and years. But it's where I built this to help gather attention and share about what I was doing. It's a blog and a website and a lot of stuff on it. Okay, getting started writing. I wanted to talk the most important piece about getting started is about what I call the storytelling compulsion. As in everything in life, why matters. Just the speaker before me talking about weightlifting and about building the body and training the body and lifting weights and eating healthy. She mentioned that why matters. The why is so important about weightlifting. Well, that matters just as much here as in every other walk of life. The why matters. Do you want to write for fun? Do you want to write for money? Do you want to write for fame? Do you want to write for your friends and family? There's nothing wrong with any of those. I'm not here to say to you, oh, if you only want to write for money, then forget it. That's not true. Maybe you do want to write for money. I'm not going to judge you if you want to write for money or for fame, or if you just want to write for your kids or for your parents or for your nephews and nieces. That's fine too. The question is not which of these are right or wrong. It's what drives you. If it's a big enough why for you, so much so that the hard parts and the struggles and the difficult things and the patience required wouldn't just make you angry and drive you crazy, then that's fine. As long as your why is sufficient to keep you going, to keep you driving. And that's this last point. Do you have what I call the storytelling compulsion? Are you driven to tell stories? For whatever the reason is, are you driven? Can you not write? So for me, I can't not write. I haven't sat down and actually put words on paper, typing out a manuscript in weeks now. And before that was a gap of months. In those intervening times when I'm not actively writing words, I've still been writing in my head, working on story ideas, occasionally jotting down notes for a new outline. And I can't wait to get back to them because I can't stop telling stories. I have the storytelling compulsion. So my why has been to get these stories on paper, written down, and hopefully get them published, but I'm writing them regardless. I'm writing whether they never see the light of day. I share them with people, whether they're good or bad, to get feedback, and they may never be published, and that's okay. At least I will have created these cool stories that are in my head. Okay, non-traditional backgrounds again. So here, I just realized while building the slide deck that I was actually going back to the same topic while talking about writing, because I'm from a non-traditional background as a writer. I was not an English major. I have no certificates in writing. I had no training in creative writing whatsoever. And I certainly didn't have an MFA in writing. The traditional approach to being a novelist, you're supposed to have studied English, and you go and you get a liberal arts degree, and then you get an MFA in writing. I know friends in social media that are gone and they got their MFA, and then they start writing their book, and they get an agent, and they get published. And it actually works that way. I know a few examples that have gone that way, and I know agents who look for that type of person because their traditional background. It's how it works. It's a real thing. But there's also people like me from a non-traditional background who are trying to break in. Interesting. And I had never written a book or even a real complex story when I started writing in 2008. And boy, did it show. But I was an avid reader, an avid learner, and I had a great why. What does this mean? Well, I knew and I assumed, and it was far more than I thought, this is going to mean it requires more work. Not that much different from breaking into cyber from a non-traditional background. It also requires more discipline, perhaps, than someone who has a lot more background in training and writing. And it can absolutely still equal success. I believe, because I know what I want, that I'm eventually going to have different levels of success. I've had more success already with literary agents and with interest in what I'm doing, with support telling me this is actually good by the agents that I've had. That's enough success for me to live on forever. Again, if I never am published. People saying, hey, this is good. This could be published. It hasn't happened yet, but it could. The beginning, middle, and what I call no end as a writer. Here's what I would say to anyone listening who has ever thought, I've got ideas, and maybe it's not fantasy. Maybe it's a romance. Maybe it's horror. Maybe it's action. Maybe it's political thrillers. But you want to write, and maybe you have great ideas, and maybe you've played with it, and you want to get started. The beginning is to write stuff. I know that sounds silly, but the beginning is to write. I have come across people, quite a few people over the last almost 20 years of writing and being involved with writing, of people who have great ideas and who actually reach out to agents and to publishers about them before they've written a manuscript, before they've actually written anything down. They have the outline, or they have the thoughts or the design, they have the pitch, the summary, but haven't written the story, and will go to someone and say, hey, represent me or buy this. And now this is, again, talking about fiction. And nonfiction, it's pretty common to go to a publisher or an agent with an outline or proposal to write something that's in nonfiction, that's real world. But in fiction, start writing, especially if you're new to it like I was. Learn your style. There's lots of styles out there. One of the general breakdowns people talk about is plotters, pantsers, and plotsters. Plotters are people who really work out a plot and an outline in detail, and they have to plot everything out before they write their stories. They've got to decide the whole timeline, all the characters in their arcs, the scenes, kind of the script of the book, have it outlined, and then write it. Then there's pantsers who fly by the seat of their pants. These are the folks who just write and just put things down and don't do a lot of planning, don't think it through very well, and let it just come and organize it as it happens. And people who find plotting and being a plotter to slow them down and to not get to the finished product quick enough. Then there's plotsters, who are mixes of the two. People who are plotters, but who also do go by the seat of their pants and just let things happen. I found out after writing the first version of my first book that I'm a little bit of both. I'm a bit of a plotster. I'm really big on plotting and outlines and dates and details, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But as I go, I'm also very big on letting the story unfold and change as it happens. It just naturally will evolve. And I will go with those evolutions. Sometimes it'll change the whole arc of the story. New characters will be written in that I just think make sense at the time that weren't in the formal outline. That's a mix. It's plotting and pantsing, so plotsters. Share your stuff. This is the other big thing that happens, and it's on the next slide. You'll see it in a moment, which is the Bilbo Baggins syndrome. Some of you have seen in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, Bilbo's written his book, The Hobbit, There and Back Again, and Frodo wants to see it, and he says, it's not ready yet. He doesn't want to show it, and Frodo says, it's not ready for what? And he says, for reading. It's not ready yet. It's hard to share your stuff sometimes. If you're the type of person who doesn't like rejection, writing can be hard because rejection happens a lot, especially if you really want to get published out in the mainstream publishing world and not be self-published. So you have to be okay with sharing your stuff. You have to be able to embracing criticism, not just receiving it, but embracing it so that you can learn your weaknesses. You need to read, and you need to write more. So the first book I wrote it and started in 2008. It took me about a year to write the whole book. It was probably, 220,000 words, which is about twice as long as any young adult novel should be. I'm looking at you, J.K. Rowling, way too long. But I wrote it, and it was long, but I finished the story. And I started the sequel. And then I reread it, and a couple of years went by, and I read it again, and I realized it was crap. It was terrible. It was really bad. And it gave me a starting point, but it was terrible. And then I got into the middle as I wrote more and more. The middle stages, finding my writing tribe and repeating all of the beginning all over again. It's important to have in anything you do a tribe, people who you run with. I had the absolute joy of being connected with several published authors that here in the Cincinnati area through a friend of a friend, and they embraced me and they read my stuff and they helped me along and they gave me feedback. I joined an online writers group back then in the early 20-teens that I don't think exists anymore, but it was fantastic to have critique partners and reading reviews and get feedback, tons of advice on improving. So you got to get training, you've got to get tutoring, you've got to get editing, and all forms of practice, writers groups, local, online, whatever, to share and get feedback and see where you need to improve. Find your weaknesses, hone your craft, write better, do it again, write more, share more, and just keep going. By the time we got to around 2016, when I got my first agent, I had gotten a lot better. I know this because I would look back at my original writing from 2008 and I just cringe. Like I don't even want to touch it. It's funny how bad it was, right? But that's how it works. And now when I look back at the writing I did in 2018, I think it's okay, but I could do better. It's not as bad though. I could see the development. And then there's no end to the writing process. Finished a manuscript or two, yeah, that's a great place to be. Keep going. Want to be traditionally published? Maybe you want to be self-published. That's a route that often is chosen nowadays. Go for it. Consider getting a literary agent. If you actually have written stories and you've done some feedback loops, you have a critique partner, go for an agent. Reach out and see if you can throw some pitches out there and see if anyone's interested. It's awesome. It works. It happens. And if you really are not able to not write, if your why is big enough, you're going to find yourself here. And it's fun. And then share, learn, grow, and keep going. There is no end if you really like this kind of a hobby, this part of your life. Last few points. I know we're almost out of time. Finding an artist, I put with a question mark. So I had the absolute joy of having an artist in my home. I have several, actually. Several of my kids are incredible artists. They're grown adults now. I still call them kids, but they're my adult children. And several of them are amazing artists. And the art you see on these pages that I've included come from my website. It's art that they created years ago. Amazing stuff. It's a world building tool for me to see artist renderings of things I've described. Other world building tools, detailed outlines, timelines, maps. Maps can be really huge to start and ground a story. Histories, wikis. I have a huge wiki of one of the main worlds that I've built, which is tons of information on people, characters, countries, politics, events, history, timelines, birthdays, all these things that matter. When wars happened, tons of information that support world building. Don't forget the people. Too many authors out there, especially in fantasy, become overwhelmed with the magic and with the action and forget the people. That stories really resonate if they're based on people, if they're based on their experiences, their emotions. I learned that the hard way. Use critique partners. Overcome the "it's not ready yet." That's I had to mention that earlier, but Bilbo rings in my head every time I'm holding back. It's not ready yet can really slow you down. And maybe it's not ready yet. Share it anyway. And then rejection and other challenges are a big deal. Rejection is real, especially if you're going to share, and it's okay. Let it make you better. Here is a quick view of the map. This map is actually framed, and on my wall, this is the map of one of the main worlds in my main young adult series that I've written several books of. It's called the Tome of Passeron, and this map, it's just a thing of beauty. A friend of mine who lives in Maryland created this for me as a gift based on my hand sketch, and I just use it all the time. And again, it's hanging in our dining room, and I love it. And that is the end. Here's my contact information. First, as a cybersecurity guy, and second, as an author at The Tome Writer. Feel free to hit me up in either one of those, and thank you.